Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Our Small Footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. Not that my surroundings lend to that at the moment. It is my 8 weekly grocery shop this week, and so I'm currently at my mum's place in Brisbane, which is 4 hours from home and where I do my groceries. So I'm here for the next few days, and before I left, I did up the video of my what we eat in a week for the last week of the 8-week period, barring this bit here that I'm not there. So I did all the footage up and everything of it over the last week, and I haven't done an intro or a voiceover for it. So I'm going to sit in my mum's air-conditioned apartment doing the voiceover for the what we eat in a week for that stretch meals in that last week of the 8-week period, and put it up for you guys in the morning so that you can see that as a video while I'm gone. The meals over that week are always very carb heavy because that's what we rely on towards the end of the week, and I try and be as creative as possible so that we're getting things that haven't necessarily eaten a whole lot of over the 8 weeks, so the same ingredients, but I try and be a little bit creative with them because we're running so low on things that it's kind of important to sort of mix it up a little bit with what's left. We're very short on a lot of things over that last week, especially because it was a whole 8 weeks between shops this time. So it took a little bit of creativity to work it all out. So I'm going to share that with you today, and that it'll be the last week of the 8-week period. So enjoy watching and seeing what I managed to come up with, and I will see you again on the next video. Thanks, guys. We started off with baked oatmeal for this sort of a lunch breakfast type thing. I'm still working on the baked oatmeal. I still haven't quite hit the sweet spot on what I like texture and taste wise, but this one used the apple butter. So I've got many jars of apple butter on the shelf from when I canned up those 180 kilos of apples, and I used it to make apple butter barbecue sauce and lots of things, but I really want to find some more uses for it. So this was an apple butter and cinnamon baked oatmeal, and to me it tasted wonderful. It had the perfect sort of a texture, but as you can see, it didn't stick to the pan. It came out in slices. It was soft and warm without being soggy, but the kids weren't overly enamored of it. So we're back to trying again, but it was a baked oatmeal, apple butter, cinnamon, and I thought it was quite good. For dinner that night, we had potato bake. So I'm still playing with the Thermomix cutter, and I have a whole video of this whole potato bake that I might put up as well, because it's a dairy-free potato bake using my dry French onion soup mix to flavour the white sauce. And so I sliced all the potato up using the new Thermomix cutter, and then layered it with this white sauce that I made that has the French onion soup mix in it, so that it creates these layers of scalloped potatoes with the white sauce and things like that. It was really very tasty. I'll have to do that again. It's a lot easier with the being able to use the Thermomix cutter to slice the potatoes than to do them by hand, and it's very consistent, which I like. All the slices are a nice consistent size, which helps it to cook evenly through, which is always the challenge with potato bake, because if your slices are varying, then it's sometimes hard because certain bits of potato will be firmer than others, and it's that sort of change in texture while you're eating it can ruin it a little bit. So we had that. We also ate that with the crumb chicken pieces that we got in the hamper. So these were just whole bone-in chicken pieces that I put in the oven at the same time as I did the potato bake, and we ate the crumbed chicken along with the potato bake for dinner. I think we had steamed veggies as well, but I don't show them here. For lunch the next day, I'm not 100% sure what we had for lunch. Probably leftovers of some sort. That is what we tend to rely on a lot at this point of the month. But for dinner, we had brioche hamburger rolls, which I made using the Thermomix. These are a yeasted brioche dough roll, and they turned out really wonderfully. And then we had these marinated chicken pieces that had come in the hamper as well. So I defrosted those, and then I just fried them up for us to have on burgers. So we had some tomato from the hamper as well. There was some sliced cheese for me that I had that came in the hamper too, and we had them with mayo and that sort of thing, and just had brioche rolls with the chicken and the tomato, and just, you know, a nice comforting chicken burger type meal for dinner that night. The next day I made French onion meatballs, and I'm pretty sure we ate some of these for lunch and then had them for dinner as well. So I make a meatball recipe. It's using beef mince, and I use my dried French onion soup mix in it as well, some sourdough breadcrumbs generally speaking, a bit of coconut milk to moisten those breadcrumbs, a couple of eggs, a whole lot of minced up onion. I may have done these on the channel before, because I do make them fairly regularly. I like to weigh my meatballs too, which people side-eye me a little bit for, but it makes it consistent sizing, which is consistent cooking time, and also it makes me stretch the meat further. So I like to do 30-gram balls for my meatballs, and I just weigh them into little chunks, and then I roll them into balls and put them on the baking trays, and I bake them in the barbecue, which is our oven. And they don't take very long at all. We tend to freeze these in meal sizes, so I don't want to overcook them because they will be cooked again when they're reheated. So I try definitely to make sure they're cooked all the way through, especially if you're eating them that day, but I don't tend to overcook them. So I think that was lunch and dinner that day. For dinner we probably had it with mashed potato, vegetables and gravy. I don't seem to have it pictured here, and lunch we probably had it just as snacks with fruit and stuff. Next day I did homemade potato chips. So I did again, I don't think I've got lunch here, and lunch at this point of the month is probably pretty boring because it's whatever leftovers we can find. Dinner we did potato chips, so I used my Vivor dicer and cut my potatoes into strips. I then parboiled those potato chips, patted them dry, and then fried them off in a little bit of oil. I can't remember what we served them with, to be honest. This was the only footage I took that day. It was probably some sort of frozen meat from the hamper as well, or it could have been leftover meatballs, or really could have been anything. Remembering to film these what we eat in a week sometimes is quite hard, but we had homemade potato chips with it anyway, and it was yummy. The next day for breakfast we had frittatas. So we used some of that smoked sausage that I had cooked up, smoked all the sausage, and then sliced up and put in the vacuum seal bags in the freezer. And what I did was I defrosted it the day before so I could use it, and diced it up. I cooked it off in the pan with some silver beet and probably some onion and whatever else I had, probably tin of corn, because that's normally what we tend to add to it, and the smoked sausage. And then I did my normal. I put it in 2 pie dishes. I do 24 eggs with a tin and a half of coconut, so a tin of coconut milk, and then 200 mils of water, so 600 grams all up of coconut milk. And I just do that in the Thermomix so that it gets lots of air. I pour it over the base vegetables and stuff, and then I cook it in the barbecue until it's done. It's really variable depending on how much stuffing you have in there, how much solids you have in with that egg mix. And we cook it up and we serve it with homemade mayo. So I made a batch of our duck egg homemade mayo with the immersion blender, and we eat the frittata with that drizzled over the top. It's one of our favorite breakfasts. We are a little low on eggs at the moment because the chickens are a bit hot, I think, is part of the problem. So we are having to not do this as often, which is a bit of a bummer because it's something that we normally rely on quite a lot at the end of the month. But we had them this day. Next day, we probably had leftover frittata for lunch because, again, I don't have a lunch here, but I would imagine that we had leftover frittata with other bits and pieces. I make 2 of them, but generally we eat one and a tiny bit of the other one in one meal, and then we have the leftovers the next day with whatever other leftovers are pulled out of the fridge. I normally try and film our lunches as well, even if they're leftovers, but obviously I was just not really feeling it. So you're getting mainly dinners for this, what we eat in a week. For dinner the next night, we did the pesto pasta that I do. So it's a chicken pesto pasta today. It was smoked chicken. And I've got videos on here before, but it's egg yolks with pesto, lemon juice, a bit of olive oil, and a little bit of cowboy candy, all mixed together. And then you use the heat of the pasta that's just coming out of the water to cook that egg, and it turns it into this lovely creamy sauce. And then we had it with smoked chicken. In this particular one, sometimes we add greens or veggies or whatever we've got. I don't think we had anything in particular this day, so it was just the smoked chicken. And we had it with just dried spaghetti because that's what we had available. It's a favourite meal of everyone's, and they really, if they don't eat it all, then they eat a whole lot. They eat it the next morning, the next day for breakfast and lunch. They really like it cold as well as like a pasta salad, so it works for me. The next day I did flatbreads. So I did sourdough flatbreads. I do sourdough dough the night before and let it proof overnight, and then I pull it out the next morning to make the flatbreads. And I just roll out about 60-gram balls, and then I don't worry about shape or anything else, and we just fry them off in the cast iron until they're cooked, and everyone has whatever they want on them. I think this day some of them had some of that leftover pesto pasta with it, and I think there was some smoked sausage left in the fridge as well that could have been used, and probably some leftover meatballs. So I didn't end up freezing any of those meatballs. We ate them over the span of a few days, so that's probably what most of what our leftovers have been in this period of time. For dinner that night we had pizza. It must have been requested because I would have made the dough the day before. So we had pizza. I couldn't find the pizza sauce for some reason. I found it now, but nobody could find the pizza sauce for some reason. So we used some of the apple butter barbecue as the sauce base, which was quite nice. All the normal stuff. We used tin corn, and we used leftover meatballs again. So we broke up those meatballs and put them on the pizza as well. Another way to use them, which is slightly different but stretches the meal again. I had cheese on mine because I can, and we use mayo as a drizzle over the top. Over everyone else's it's more important because they have no cheese, but I really like it as well, so I put it on mine too. So it was just sourdough pizza cooked in the Baker Stone pizza box, oven box, and it was with the leftover meatballs. The next day for breakfast we had Dutch baby pancake. So this is something, again, when we have lots of eggs, that is a really good one to make. Really simple recipe that I use. It is for this particular tray, which is a Classica cast iron tray. It has 18 eggs in it, which is really great. And we cook it in the barbecue, and it ends up with this lovely baked custard texture. It's just a wonderful filling breakfast that everyone really likes. It's really nice with a bit of maple syrup, or with some stewed apples or blueberry confit, anything like that. It's really nice, even basically just on its own. There's no sugar in it though, so it does a little bit of sweetness in a top works quite well with it. For dinner that night, Darryl had gone to town that day to buy a few things, and I had run out of any sort of bones to cook up for the dogs, because we pressure cook chicken bones and vegetables and brown rice and things like that for the dogs, and we puree it up with the Thermix till it's just a paste. And I had run out of bones to do anything for the dogs, so I got him to buy 2 whole chickens while he was in town. They were not cheap, as nothing is when we buy it from the local, which is unfortunate, but I really wanted them, so he grabbed them. I had a whole bunch of our homegrown small red potatoes, so I washed them really well and stuck them in the bottom of the trays, and then we put the chickens on top. Now I stuff my chickens with just a few pieces of lime. I don't have any fresh at the moment, but I do have frozen lime pieces, which works just as well. So Sonnet helped me with this one and shoved a few pieces of lime up the bums of the chickens, and then we just spray them lightly with a bit of oil and salt and cook them just like that. We find that works perfectly. The bit of moisture from the lime works, and the little bit of salt and oil gives you that crispy skin. So they were just cooked in the barbecue as well, and we cooked both of those on 2 big trays of potatoes, and we had some of that for dinner. We then had some of that for lunch the next day as well. There was leftover potatoes and chicken, and the first night we served it with vegetables and gravy as well. So the second day we just had the potatoes and chicken, and they might have had a tin of corn or something with it as well, but we had the leftovers for lunch the next day. And then for dinner that night, we had pasticcio. So I had never made it before. I don't know how it's pronounced, so excuse me on that. Apparently it's equivalent of a Greek lasagna. So it sounded really nice, and again, I'm trying to use some of the stuff that I've got left at the end of that 8-week period that is going to work for us. So I found a couple of kilos of mince in the bottom of the freezer that were vacuum sealed up, so I had pulled them out the day before and stuck them in the fridge and gone, I'll find something to do with them. I did consider making hamburger rolls, but we had no salads, so I thought that I went looking for other stuff, and I think someone made this in one of the Thermomix groups, and so I decided to give it a go. There is a cookie dough recipe for it, but it's for a lot smaller portion than I was making. So I had a quick look at a bunch of different recipes and basically went with it. Now, it does normally have dairy in it too. Mine doesn't, obviously, so it's not very authentic, but it was super tasty. So it has a layer of macaroni on the bottom that you cook the macaroni, and then you mix eggs through it. Now, normally you'd mix cheese as well, but we don't use cheese, so a bit of nutritional yeast and egg through the pasta in the bottom, and then you push it down nice and firm. After that, you put a layer of meat sauce on it. So I made the meat sauce to the varied recipes out there, which it had tomato paste and tomatoes and a few spices and some balsamic vinegar and things like that in it. I made it to the recipe. I actually didn't, come to think of it. It normally has a layer of spinach in it, apparently, by the recipes that I was looking at. There's pasta, and then there's a layer of spinach, and then the meat. I don't have any spinach at the moment, and I used all the silver beet the other day. I don't have much in the way of silver beet or anything like that. So what I actually did was, when I made the meat sauce, I have these frozen containers of zucchini butter in the freezer that I use for a whole bunch of things. So I had actually pulled that out earlier that day as well to defrost, and I put a whole container of zucchini butter in as part of the meat sauce. I think I dropped I put one less tin of tomatoes and put the zucchini butter in it instead. So my zucchini butter has zucchini and garlic and herbs and spices, really nice. And I thought that it would add some veg to this dish that I wasn't going to put veg on the side, and add some flavour to the meat sauce. So I did that. And then I made the white sauce, but a dairy-free version, and it has egg yolks in it as well, which I thought would be wonderful. So lots of protein in there as well as carbs and everything else, but it sounded nice. I think I filmed the whole process of this, so I can come back and share it if you'd like me to share it. It was, dairy-free as well, and with the egg yolks, and then layered. Of course, when we pulled it out of the oven, it looked superb. Considering there's no cheese in that sauce, it browned up lovely. And when you first serve it up, when it's hot, it's a little bit of train smash, always is. Kids never wait. But I did come back when it was chilled to show you that if you pull it out once it's cooled, then it does layer up like a lasagna. It was quite nice. And we had leftovers of that the next day as well, it was really nice the next day, which tomato meat sauce based stuff generally is really nice the next day. So that was the week leading up to me coming to do my groceries. Now, I did forget to give my normal disclaimer that I don't show breakfasts, generally speaking. The breakfasts that I do show are sort of morning tea lunch time, because Darryl and I only eat 2 meals a day, generally speaking, have a coffee in the morning and then have lunch sort of at 11ish, and then dinner with the kids. So each of those days, the kids would have also had another meal of breakfast of some sort in there, whether it was cereal and milk, whether it was leftover flatbreads and stuff, or porridge, or whatever else. So this week was mainly dinners, because I obviously didn't film a lot of the lunches, but it's normally 2 meals a day to show you. So that was the last week leading right up to when I left for the groceries. So that is all the way up until the Sunday, and I'll be back on the Friday, and the Friday will be 8 weeks since the last shop. So I think we did pretty well, considering we bought those chickens, but other than that, I think I did pretty well at sort of making things still interesting. It does get more challenging, and it gets more time consuming, which is frustrating sometimes because I just get a bit over food, but it's totally doable. So that was a week, what we eat in a week, in our 2 monthly grocery shop right at the end of it. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you on the next video. Bye guys.